Hi, everyone, and thanks for being with me. I'm going to discuss a film that's been released. Well, it was released a few months ago in the United States, UK just a little bit later, and here in Australia in the last week or so. And it's got a little bit of it's got a lot of people in a tizzy. And the reason for that, well, firstly, The Sound of Freedom is the movie. And I just need to make a disclaimer before I start talking in great detail about this movie because I haven't seen it. Will I see it? Yeah, I hope so. I like action movies. I certainly like movies which are about social justice, which are about bringing or creating an awareness of situations which we all should be aware of. You know, we all tend to live in our own little bubbles. We don't know really what's happening in other parts of the world that perhaps we should because we simply don't come in contact with that part of the world. I can remember over the years people have said to me, I don't understand why, or how you can do the work that you do, given the types of conversations you would have with people and around domestic violence and childhood sexual abuse and all those things that I've talked about, because that is the world I chose to live in, and that it's a terrible world, and it's other people's world. I step into that, and I do what I can to help people to manage and deal with those particular issues. But this movie is asking us to step into a world whereby we become aware of child trafficking. Now, child trafficking is an industry that has accumulated a great deal of wealth, takes place in many countries, even here in Australia. And certainly takes place in the United States, takes place in Asia, India, Indonesia, all over the world. So there's no disputing to start with that child trafficking does take place. It does. It's horrific. Now, in the movie, they certainly talk about, I believe, I've read a fair bit about it in the meantime, they talk about the fact that you can buy some heroin, for example, and you only get to use it once. Once it's used, it's gone. With a child, that can be unsolved at least 10 times in one day. And that thought in itself is quite horrific. So I'm not here to bag a movie that talks about child trafficking. It's an important story, needs to be told, and it fortunately is being told. I see that as a good thing. What we need to have a look at is the baggage that sits around this particular movie. Now, firstly, it's worth noting that the movie was made in 2015, I think, and it took a number of years for it to make it to the cinema, primarily because people wouldn't distribute it to start with, and they had to go through a number of distributors. And then up cropped this organisation called Angel Productions, which is a right-wing film industry producer who I believe with some of their movies, they took out nudity, they took out other stuff that the Christian right didn't think was appropriate. And then along came this movie, and they found ways to fund it. Now, the star of the show is Jim Caviezel, and I don't know, I think that's how you pronounce his name. If not, please correct me. Now, Jim is acting as Tim Bollard in the movie. Now, Tim Bollard's an actual individual. He has a podcast. You can watch it if you like. Of course, you can. But it's a right-wing podcast, and he interviews people that have got some weird and wonderful beliefs. Jim is one of those persons that he interviews who has some of these strange beliefs. And the point is that Jim himself is a QAnon theorist and has attended many QAnon shows talking about adrenochrome and a whole lot of other bizarre QAnon theories. Now, the reason why this movie has taken off is that it eventually became released, or they started to talk about it or whatever, during a time when QAnon has become a big deal. So QAnon was relatively little known. It was just a bunch of crazy people who thought of these crazy conspiracy theories back in 2018 and 19. And along came, of course, coronavirus, and that just caused this idea around all these conspiracy theories to be spread worldwide, and particularly, I think, in the United States and here in Australia. So a lot of people took up these ideas. Now, the thing about adrenochrome is that adrenochrome is a substance that can be extracted from young people, children, apparently, that gives you the elixir of life. So it makes you look younger, whatever. All crap, incidentally, not at all true. There is a product called adrenochrome which is used in some medical procedures. It's artificially made, I think. Look it up, who cares? But it doesn't do what these people say. So conspiracy theorists, including Jim Caviezel, argue that a lot of these children are kidnapped for this purpose. A lot of children are kidnapped because they're vulnerable, live in countries where the rules and laws aren't as they should be. And I'm certainly the first person who will admit that there's a lot of political corruption in these countries that causes these kids to be removed. Now, I just want to make this particular point clear to everybody, and that if you're going to buy into these sorts of conspiracy theories, then one needs to look at Stephen Miller and Donald Trump separating children from their parents when Donald Trump was President of the United States. One could argue that Donald Trump consumes adrenochrome at enormous quantities, because that's what gives him the yellow face, what makes the 77-year-old look like he's, well, to me, he looks like he's 77, but I'm sure when he looks in the mirror, he sees a 50-year-old. So one could argue that the United States has participated particularly in the removal of children. It was an actual government policy. So isn't it logical, therefore, that if governments are involved in this, Donald Trump is at the forefront of all of this, because he was the one who put a policy in place where they were removing children at the border. So, but Donald Trump, he saw this video, he saw this movie, he thought it was fabulous, because it consolidated his view that the world is full of crap and that he's the only person on this planet that can sort it out, even though there's probably a good chance, if the adrenochrome theory was true, that he himself was probably participating in that. It's not true, but it's not a bad theory either. So if you want to advocate that particular conspiracy theory from me, please feel free. I think that that's a conspiracy theory that should be out there, and that conspiracy theorists should be taking note of that, given that they're the ones that attribute all of the wonderful things around QAnon, whatever they might be, to someone like Donald Trump, who is forever posting stuff around QAnon and what they mean. Now, in The Guardian, they talk a little bit about this. So I think this is the UK version of The Guardian. It is the movie that woke Nazis at CNN, this is a quote, the Washington Post and The Guardian, supposedly don't want us to see, as well as the plucky little indie that has beaten giant franchise such as Mission Impossible, Indiana Jones at the US box office. But although Sound of Freedom has, as of this weekend, taken nearly $178 million, I don't know when this was, when was this published? I can't see, just offhand. This is 22nd of August 2023, I had to add. So it's pretty damn recent. In fact, it's just a few days old. It had been released 5 years ago, 5 years, I lied. As originally intended, this mid-budget thriller might have sunk without trace. Instead, it has struck gold in these politically polarised conspiracy theory-addled times, boosted by Donald Trump, Fox News and the religious right, not to mention adherence to the wacko QAnon conspiracy theory. Now, I agree. That's the reason why it's successful. Now, I'll tell you why I know that. Because I started to watch the crazy people on Dave Campbell and the Freedom Fighters, whatever they are, on their Facebook channel recently, and they were talking about, in fact, they were doing a live feed from one of these cinemas, And as it turned out, the cinemas that it's being shown at are the Dendy cinemas. We don't have any here in Adelaide. They have plenty interstate. And shareholder in the Dendy cinemas happens to be Mel Gibson, apparently. To what extent he has control over that, do not know. But they're the places that are showing this video. And all these people were lining up to go and see this movie, pardon me, because they believe it espoused their QAnon views in relation to adrenochrome and particularly the trafficking of children, and that it's the political elites who are doing this trafficking. Now, the movie itself, I doubt whether necessarily talks about that. In fact, the producer of the videos, or the director, I should say, he has chosen not to have anything to do with any of this political shit. He just made a movie, and it's been this bloke, what's his name, Jim Caviezel. It's been him that's primarily been promoting this with the QAnon theme. He's not too happy about it, apparently, doesn't want to get involved in those sorts of discussions. So I would suggest that if you feel so inclined, go and see the movie, enjoy it. It's a thriller. It's based on Tim Ballard. It's true to some extent, I guess, with some licenses, and that it does confront an issue that we all need to be mindful of, and that is child trafficking. The issue around child trafficking, as I said earlier, is really about it happening in countries whereby they're not taking appropriate action for it to stop. That it is, it's like, I guess it's like any illegal function. There's a whole body of people that are involved in this process, and I'm sure that there's a number of politicians who are also paid off to keep quiet as well. And where that goes, I do not know. There's no evidence to say that the CIA are involved. There's certainly no evidence to say that politicians specifically are involved in this, and that certainly not the left of politics. My conspiracy theory is that Donald Trump is. So, given their policies around child removal. So, let me know what you think about all of that. And also, I'd like to think that if you wouldn't mind, just subscribe to my little channel so that I can get my subscriptions up as well. And also, make a comment down below. Let me know what you think of any of the things that I'm talking about so that we can have a discussion around them. So, thanks everybody. Thanks for being with me. Take care, look after yourselves, and be safe.